What if I told you that one of England's queens was married off at just 6 years old to a 29-year-old king, and then completely erased from the history books? This isn't a dark fairy tale. This is the true story of Joan of England, the child bride, the diplomatic pawn, and the forgotten queen whose life was shaped by politics, power, and silence. Stay with me for the next 10 minutes, because once you hear her story, you'll never forget her name again. In the heart of medieval Europe, where power was traded like currency and royal bloodlines were the backbone of empires, every marriage was a political move. And in 1328, one of the strangest and saddest marriages in English royal history took place. Joan of England was born in 1321. She was the daughter of King Edward II of England and Isabella of France, a queen with her own controversial legacy. Joan was just a child, full of promise, curiosity, and innocence. But in medieval Europe, royal children weren't raised with lullabies and toys. They were raised with treaties and expectations. By the time Joan was 6, she was already betrothed to David, the future King of Scotland. He was 29 years old. Yes, a 6-year-old girl handed over to a grown man for the sake of politics. Why? Because England and Scotland were bitter enemies. To secure peace, Edward III, Joan's brother and the new king, agreed to marry her to the son of Robert the Bruce, Scotland's legendary warrior king. David was crowned king just months after his father's death, and Joan, still barely past her dolls and nursery rhymes, was sent to live in a foreign land as queen. But her life was far from royal. In fact, it was anything but. Joan and David's marriage was never really a marriage. They lived together for many years, but historians believe it was in name only. There was no love, no closeness. Joan was a political symbol, not a wife. And when Scotland erupted in conflict again, Joan was swept away in its chaos. In 1346, during the Battle of Neville's Cross, King David was captured by the English. And Joan? She was left behind in Scotland, alone, forgotten. She eventually returned to England. But here's the tragedy. Even back home, she didn't matter. She had no children. She had no power. She was treated like an outsider in her own royal family. Joan spent her final years in obscurity. She died at the age of 41, buried in a convent in London. No grand tomb, no songs of glory, no titles remembered. She had once been Queen of Scotland, but history forgot her. There are no statues of Joan, no portraits that captured her youth. Only fragments of her life remain in royal records, barely more than a whisper. Why did this happen? Because history remembers conquerors, not child brides. Because power writes the story, and Joan never held the pen. Because she never gave the crown an heir, she became disposable. But if you listen closely, past the noise of battles and kings and victories, you'll hear her silence. And that silence tells a story far louder than words. Joan of England was married at 6, crowned queen in a foreign land, and discarded by both history and her own people. She deserved better. She deserves to be remembered. If you believe forgotten voices like Joan's deserve to be heard, if you want more raw, untold stories buried by time, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Because on this channel, we dig up the uncomfortable truths, the erased lives, and the history they never taught you in school. And remember, every queen has a story, even the ones they tried to erase.